Welcome, everyone, to the Nerd Journey Podcast, episode number 44. We're joining you every week to talk IT career progression and bring you the advice we wish we'd been given earlier in our careers. I'm your host, John White, at VJourneyman on Twitter, joined by my co-host, Nick Cordy, at NetworkNerd_. Hey, Nick, how's it going?
I'm doing great, John. I am moderately caffeinated and ready to go. We are VMware solution engineers with backgrounds in IT operations. We hope our career discussions will be vendor neutral, relevant across disciplines, and remain timeless. If you're enjoying our content, please drop us a positive review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you subscribe. And if you want to get in touch with us, tweet or DM at Nerd Journey. Ultimately, we're just two nerds on a journey.
A journey to virtual enlightenment.
So let's take a trip.
Great, Nick. Hey, new intro. I don't want to talk about it too much, but we just kind of reworked what we were doing.
Yeah, we changed it up a little bit. You know,
Yeah.
we're both a little punchy this evening, especially John.
Well, it's so much later for me than it is for you.
Yeah,
Wait,
absolutely. Since you live in the past.
Oh, that's right. It's the opposite.
It's later for you because you're like 55, but
It's 65, but okay. All right.
Well, okay. Retirement comes soon then.
Yep. Social Security and all that.
Yeah.
Hey,
absolutely.
believe it or not, July 16th is actually the 1-year anniversary of our first episode. So time flies. We wanted to take a bit of time to talk about the past year of podcasting.
Yes. So come with us, listeners, on a journey over the past year's experience for us and see what you think. See what we learned and how we perceive it and maybe what we'll do better.
Nice. So we have an idea for structure. We want to talk about the launch, really what our ideas were around when we first started, and then get into some episode retrospectives, talk about the things that kind of stood out to us, and then look to the future, the things we want to do better, ideas that we have for future episodes and things like that. So with that in mind, let's talk about that launch. Originally, we had a theme, like this idea, a thesis, and maybe it was a little bit hazy. At least I knew it was for me. When I think I first pitched you on the idea, you were just starting at VMware. You hadn't started yet. And I was like, well, we should do a podcast about that. We should do a podcast about your experiences at VMware, coming from IT operations, learning about that. And that actually is not what this podcast is about, right? We kind of realized that what it was a little bit more about careers and career progression for IT professionals. I think you and I were both in situations where we work for small and medium-sized businesses. And in those businesses, I think we both observed people who were complaining about being dead-ended and not knowing what to do, feeling trapped. So it kind of evolved into a reaction, some actual constructive advice for people in that situation, and expanding on that a little bit, for other people who are looking to push forward and maybe don't feel as dead-ended or trapped, but still want to progress and move forward. So that's kind of the idea on that.
Yeah, I was actually pretty blown away that you wanted me to be on a podcast with you. I'm like, what can I offer? So I guess the listeners can tell me if there's been something good, hopefully.
Yeah. Well, I think originally, it's not that either of us are super experienced podcasters, right? But we are in that unique situation where we work for vendors and we came from IT operations. And, here we are. Hopefully, we got here. It's definitely a career progression. And until I got here and until I got out of IT operations, I didn't understand what that progression looked like. So looking back, I'm just hoping that we can like map out for people a little bit better all the options that there are. And it's not just the option and the path that we took to working as solution engineers and, pre-sales technical roles, but, other paths that as we interact with more people, we see, that kind of architect role, the, if you work for a vendor, like a tech marketing role, working for a partner in the channel, there's all these different options that we saw, um, and that we interact with on a daily, weekly basis that, I just kind of didn't think about when I was in IT operations, like deep in the trenches. It was always, get better at what I'm doing, maybe work for a bigger company, but even that idea seemed daunting, didn't know how to make that jump. So, maybe offer some concrete career advice. And that is the direction that we finally, realized after recording episodes, that we realized that that was that was the actual topic of the podcast. That's kind of funny that you discover that as you do it. I don't know about you.
Yeah, fake it till you make it, right? Don't most people say the way to get experience at something is just start doing it? So that's kind of what we did.
Yeah, that's it exactly, and hopefully we gave some of that advice. I mean, people have probably heard it from us, right? Um, you're going to be bad at it, so you might as well just start doing it, and maybe be bad, like not in front of other people. Well, we actually threw away like probably 4 or 5 episodes, where we kind of pre-recorded. Is this our first episode? Nope, not it yet. And then finally we had like a release candidate, and then another release candidate. I want to say, I don't remember if we published release candidate 1 or 2, but we definitely got better, and hopefully are still getting better.
Fun fact, I'm pretty sure one of the early episodes went out with you saying release candidate 2 in the live version. But yeah, I mean, we recorded several times just to practice, and as you said, we threw away some parts that weren't really part of the direction we wanted to go in. There were really technical analyses of different IT news, and we decided, no, that's not really our thing.
Right, right. And it's not that we don't enjoy discussing technical details, but the thing that seemed to emerge that was missing in the universe of, our communities, our various intersecting communities, was this idea of IT progression and what to do next, right? Do you want to be, the same size fish in the same size pond forever? Do you want to work for the same company forever? How do you progress? So that became the topic. I think we were going to talk about opening a little bit. That's evolved over time, and even today, as we've changed it a little bit, even bringing the idea of IT career progression and advice up top, as we kind of realize. I think we talked about, for the longest time we were saying IT career news and opinions. Well, we don't really talk about IT career, or we don't talk about IT news, and we don't have like really strong IT opinions that we're bringing to the forefront, technical opinions. It's really all about that career progression. So
To be fair, though, John has some really strong opinions in general. That's just me. Yeah.
that's totally fair. I am pretty opinionated, about quite a lot of things. There's a lot of things that I don't know a lot about, and I reserve the right to not be opinionated about those things. But I also, I'm not afraid to get challenged and refactor my thinking about anything and everything. Honestly, including the things that I'm pretty opinionated about. So hopefully, I'm bringing that to the table.
Absolutely. So I wanted to share some fun facts here. The Nerd Journey logo was actually something that my wife created. And, if anybody can guess the two city skylines that were merged, tweet that out to at Nerd Journey, and who knows, maybe we can bring you on as a guest for your reward. We don't have stickers yet. Maybe we should get those, huh, John?
Hey, that's a great idea, actually.
And you and I should get polos,
Oh
but
yeah.
you should pay for them.
Hmm.
We'll talk about that later.
Okay.
Anyway, but the music that's the intro music, and now our new interview cut over music is actually something that your wife created.
That's right. Yeah, my wife is a music professional. She's a professional flute player. But I didn't actually mean for her to create this music. And I was like, man, I really listen to the specific podcast, and it had a specific style intro, and I was like, I really would love to have something like that. And then, lo and behold, like she went into whatever the Apple music at a garage band, right? And she was like, oh, well, you said you like the trap beat? Okay, well, here's some trap beats, and then I put this theme music over it, and here's like a couple options, and I was like, oh my goodness, you've just done this. That's amazing. But yeah.
Ask and ye shall receive.
And then I did on purpose ask for transition music. We were doing transitions to and from pre-recorded interviews for a while with like just blank space, and then coming out of them with this like really annoying record scratch that every time I listened to it I hated. So I did on purpose ask her for transition music, and I was like, no rush. And then 20 minutes later, she sent us like 8 options, I think. She's amazing. She's amazing. Definitely my better half. So I did want to mention that we had, I don't know, I would say initial reservations about the ability to actually follow through, right? So I was wondering if we actually could sustain like a weekly cadence to release something, every week. I'd gone to a kind of podcast meetup, a meetup of podcasters who talked about their experiences, and one of the things, and options that came up was, well, just do a season, right? And I think maybe it was Serial was really popular at the time, and it had beginning, a middle, and an end. And it was season one is about this, season two is about this, and they one of the ideas that was out there was, well, if you have 10 good episodes and you plan them, and it doesn't need to be a story arc, but boom, just get those 10 episodes out there, and that can be your season one. Or whenever you run out of ideas and run out of steam, cut it off and retroactively make that season one, and then um, you know get steam up and do it again. Of course, having explained all of that, we have not done that, right? Nick, I want to give you full credit for really driving forward, on a weekly basis and saying, well, what are we talking about? Like, let's flush out this idea. Here's the ideas that we talked about doing. So, full credit to you.
Well, one thing I will say is I don't think John knew what he was getting into when he asked me to podcast and to release weekly. So, like, this is just, it's pretty much habit now. And it seems like every time we do an episode, every time I'm talking to somebody about the podcast, outside of us recording, I get different ideas. And even in my daily work, I'm getting ideas for, oh, what if we did this? What if we talked about that? And you'll actually notice that some some of these episodes are because of things that happen to us on the job or in life, and it's just kind of a stream of consciousness sometimes. And it's been really fun, man.
Yeah.
I love trying to come up with new and interesting ideas, and giving John a hard time on the air, of course.
Yeah, and I love listening to that. And I like subverting that expectation sometimes, Um, but yeah, I think you've like observing how you do that has really changed my thinking. And we're always hungry now and on the lookout, like, oh, that would make a really interesting podcast topic. So with that in mind, maybe we could transition to kind of a podcast like episode retrospective. um, we have um, we were going to talk about favorite moments, but like maybe we should talk about like some of the popular episodes, and we pulled some stats on those things, and we don't want to go into every episode that was had the highest downloads and most social media reactions or anything like that, but maybe we could talk about some conclusions that we had in looking over those things. So the first thing that I noticed was that um, every single time that we talked about interview topics, early process interviews, mid process interviews, late process interviews, those all kind of resonated and had a lot of downloads. Um, that generalist specialist episode that we did, that was number 26, had a strong reaction both in listens and downloads and on social media. That was the episode that we had, the most people just respond on Twitter, say, well, here's my take on, you want to stay a journalist because of this, or I'm a specialist because of this. So that was really interesting. And I don't know how to uh, do that again, right? Once you get that kind of response, it's kind of addicting. Like you want to have a strong emotional reaction, and we weren't saying one thing was better or one thing was worse, but it was something that we said, and immediately people had takes on that. So it would be nice to be able to do that on a regular basis.
Yeah, I think if we can spark something that people out there are heavily opinionated on, then we'll be successful. And it's been kind of interesting to think about, oh, I think this one will be really well received, and maybe it wasn't that well received, even though we thought it would be. And there was a totally different avenue that was very well received that we just thought, this one's okay, you know.
Right. Yeah, definitely. Um, so looking back, I would say another popular topic, consistently popular topic was managing current job career focused tasks like asking for more money. That was episode 28. Effective one-on-one manager meetings, like meetings with your manager, or considering leaving an organization. That was episode number 12 for both of those topics. Sales skills that are relevant in IT jobs, and that was episode number 5. And then number 20 was reasons to quit and figuring out an area to work, an area of destiny is what we called that, or what it was referred to in our source material. So those were, again, really interesting. I would also say that, we are obviously geographically not in the same area. I'm in the Bay Area and you're in Texas. And we have been able to record a couple times in the same room. Episode number 25, I think, is when I happened to be visiting where you live. And then episode number 29, we were, both worked for the same company, and we had a kick off a tech summit. And so we managed to record there. However, we did not notice any uh, difference in downloads and reactions to those episodes. So, I mean, that might have just been the topics that we picked for those episodes, because I think we picked them ahead of time. But it also might have been that we didn't, do a good job of promoting the fact that we happened to be in the same place at the same time, in, picture taking or whatever. So, I don't know. Any thoughts on that?
Well, we did make the Nerd Journey coffee experiment video while you were down here in Texas.
Yeah, I
And
it was really interesting to watch that again. I was so low energy. I have no idea what was going on there. But it was, I don't know, the camera went on me. We were making coffee, and maybe it was that we needed coffee, but I was so low energy in that coffee making video.
that's okay. Maybe there'll be other chances.
Yeah. Well, how about your favorite moments?
Okay, so I have a few favorite moments, and I thought it would be fun to share those and then also have each of us call out our absolute favorite, like number one.
Ooh,
Okay.
okay.
So, one of my favorite things was episode 9, where John gets on a rant about how to dress for an interview, and just some of the back and forth banter that he and I had was actually fantastic. So, go back and listen to that if you haven't heard about episode 9. And then episode 10 was pretty interesting, where John talks about the birth of the journeyman mindset. It was one of those episodes where he realized he had a lot more to say about the topic than he originally thought when we made the outline. So, always enjoy those moments. I really like the fact in bonus episode 1, John talks about how he just couldn't meet Rebecca Fitzhugh at VMworld. It just didn't work out, and he was kind of punishing himself for it. You know, Rebecca, if you're listening, maybe you need to come on the show just to make him feel better. I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's a terrible reason to come on the show. We'll come up with a really good reason to, interview Rebecca.
Yeah, there you go. And then episode 40, was quite possibly the best plug for the John White School of Mentoring that will ever be, because Paul Woodward Jr. and AJ Kuftig did a fantastic job of helping me plug that. And if you think the John White School of Mentoring isn't real, you are so wrong. Send that tweet out to @NerdJourney today, and I will send you pricing and packaging, and we'll get you some of John's time. The,
Paul and AJ just jumped right in on that.
oh, they love it. Yeah, it was great. Now, episode 17, the first time we did the intro and John did it in his Barry White voice, I don't think I've ever laughed harder in my life. I mean, it took us like 7 to 8 minutes to get back on track after that. It was fantastic. So listen for the stinger there. I will say that it was really interesting for me to have recorded podcast episodes in Las Vegas with John, here at my house a lot of the time. I recorded one in a hotel room in Oklahoma while I was on the road. There was a recording that I did in an Airbnb in Galveston back when we were getting all the release stuff together. As far as like favorite episodes, I think that, for me, the top couple would be interviewing Tom Delicati, just because he used to be my boss. And it was really cool to get his take on some things and perspectives that I hadn't heard before, even though I worked for him. And, the Jimmy Tassin episode just fascinated me, learning about his Minecraft experience and how he was able to use that as experience to get a different job. I remember reading about that in the community and really wanted to talk to him. So good stuff.
All right. And how about your number one? That was kind of something you wanted to talk about.
I think my number one would have been episode 25, Adapting to a New Manager, just because I asked John if we could do that episode, honestly, to give myself advice, because I had to adapt to a new manager this year. And I wanted to make sure that I wasn't being biased or not giving that person a chance. And it actually really helped me in that transition, I think. It was like therapy on the air.
Got it. Got it. So your number one piece of advice for the John White School of Mentoring is to step one, become a podcast co-host with me? That's
It definitely helps.
okay.
Like, it really gives you that personal feel.
And I have to, it made me do research on the topic. I hadn't thought enough about that until you suggested it as a topic. So I'm really glad that we went through that process, because it definitely was shaping my thinking at the time as well. I had I've gone through two different managers during my time at VMware. Two different management changes during my time at VMware. So, it was kind of, one of those times where I was like, oh, wait, this has happened to me. Let me think about it. And then let me read about it and, see what other people thought about it. So really good topic.
Yeah, and people may not always understand that even though we might be trying to give you advice, we're also giving ourselves advice sometimes too.
Definitely. That is definitely the case. Um, so I'll talk about my topics. Maybe I'll start out with my favorite, which was the first part of our discussion with Tom Delicati. And, he had a lot of really interesting things to say. It was a career path from IT operations to entrepreneurship, which is, again, one of those career paths that, neither of us have really taken, but is an option and we wanted to explore. But, he had this real interesting nugget, and that was why we kind of named it the sniper approach to job searches, which was, finding this area that you are an expert in or fairly advanced in, finding a user group. And if you're going to be moving to a new place, find the companies that are members of the user group that have operations in that new place that you are moving to, and apply to those companies, or have that as your initial screen. And I was just kind of blown away. It seems obvious in retrospect that would be a methodology, and it doesn't have to be a user group. It could be, some other thing, advanced in the technology, they've presented at a conference on that, or related technology, but just some other way of narrowing down all the companies in an area to some subgroup of companies that you would be interested in working for because they have this area of technology or interest that you have, some knowledge and expertise in. So that was just fascinating that he had that kind of down and he had done it. He had sniped and he hit a bullseye.
Yeah, he definitely did. Super sharp dude. And, when you're married to a career coach, it helps.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that came out as well. That was terrific. So that was his like number one piece of advice. Just make sure that you're married to a career coach, and that will help you progress your career. I was not able to implement that, but maybe I'll just call him and ask to be connected with his wife, and get that advice.
Hey, man, you got to do what you got to do.
Yeah, yeah. So some other top episodes in my mind, like this isn't a specific episode, but we did talk to you, as you were starting out at VMware. So it was really interesting to re-listen to kind of that arc of growth and maturity for you in the job from episode 1 to episode 10. That was your 7th month that we did a check-in, and then episode 21 and 22 when we did a 1-year check-in. And it was just really fascinating to hear, your perspective from the beginning to the kind of middle and to the end of that first year. So super fascinating. And then I think Joseph Griffiths, we interviewed him on episode 18, and he was talking about his journey to VCDX, the VMware Certified Design Expert, which is kind of the top, certifications, like getting a master's degree in VMware design. And just that advice that he had said, like in some of his blog posts, but to hear him say it in person, to just commit to a task, here's the goal, set the goal, and then work on it a little bit every day. Not, burn yourself out, I'm going to work 20 hours, this weekend on this thing, but like 30 minutes every day, 45 minutes every day, an hour every day, whatever it is that you can sustain, whatever that bite-sized chunk that you can handle, and then just do it every day. And maybe the corollary, the conclusion that I took away from is, and if you can't do that, then maybe it's just not that important to you. Think about that. So, that's not something that Joseph said. It's, something that I thought to myself afterwards, oh, maybe it's just not that important to me to accomplish X, right? So let me see. Oh, episode 19, we talked about progress over outcomes. And that was something that I think you heard me say and wanted me to articulate. And it really made me formalize my thinking about that topic, which was really good, to kind of, I think, just that piece of advice. If you really want to make sure that you know something, try to teach somebody else the concept. So, articulating it and formalizing it really made me kind of, re-dive into what I was trying to say and what I was thinking, and anchor that. So that was very special for me. Just, I would say overall, some of the community touch points that we've had, it's really transformed, not what I thought about the community, but kind of my experience of the VMware and VMware, ecosystem community, the various people in it, the various companies that we're interconnected with, touching base, people who are users, who are, user group leaders, meeting them. It's just been just really incredible to be a little bit more deeply connected with that group of people than I was before. And just, we had, I want to say, 4 or 6 weeks of podcast episode releases before we went to VMworld in the fall. And my experience of VMworld, like in 2018, was just so different from my experience in the 3 years that I'd gone before. It was just, being connected with the community ahead of time, and making sure to lock down meetings with people that, I didn't have an ulterior motive. They weren't my customer, or, somebody I was trying to get information from, or whatever. It's just people that I wanted to meet, and, hey, maybe I could even help them. That was just a really special experience. And hopefully we can do that more, right? Maybe we could even go to user group meetings. That would maybe be an interesting idea.
Absolutely. I would
Yeah.
agree with that. I just want to add, John, at least you know that you podcast with someone who's prepared to use any and all your words against you.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. To go back and listen to, hey, maybe we should, and then be held accountable for that. That's really a terrific experience for me. And like, yeah, I did say that, I guess, on tape. Yay me. um, I think, we mentioned the basics, job search, job interview, job hiring process to kind of, listen back through that and read the notes. It's like, yeah, we did a pretty good job of that. And, maybe we can improve on that. I don't know, formalize the structure a little bit more. There's that, we had a good response, and I really enjoyed, thinking about that again, formalizing the thinking. Um, Oh yeah, connecting with other podcasters in our community, and again in the ecosystem and interlocking communities. Ramsey Marjaba in episode 27 of the We the Sales Engineers podcast, just really cool to talk to him about what he's doing, furthering the job of the SE and the discussions that he's having around that. I thought to myself, and I think I maybe even said it during our intro, I was like, man, maybe that's actually the podcast that I wanted to do, and I just didn't have the courage to do it. Yeah, I don't know. I have to think about that. And then, Paul Woodward, the Explore VM podcast, to have him on episode 39 and 40. Um, I think as we're recording this, we haven't released it yet, but just a terrific conversation there. Ethan Banks, same thing. Episode 42 and 43 of the Packet Pushers podcast network now, right? And just talking to him about, podcasting, some of that came up as well. So just really cool. Tony Reeves in episode 32 and 33. Also, just a fascinating discussion of community and being connected with these people. I think ahead of time. Some of them we haven't met in person, but it was just all just really terrific, fun, cool stuff. Oh, I should mention also that we started. I say that we started to do interviews for the first few episodes, a bunch of episodes, actually maybe over 20, we didn't actually do interviews, right? I think our first interview was episode 13, but we did over 10 episodes where it's just the two of us talking, and to kind of dip our toes into approaching other people to have on the show and going through that growth process. It really changed how we prepared for episodes, and how much preparation, when it's just you and I, maybe we can join the session and then, kind of write notes for an hour. But when we have somebody coming on, we weren't able to do that. So it just kind of made us think, maybe we should do that all the time. Yeah, not that we, always do. But anyway, those are kind of my highlights. So long-winded John highlights.
What if we go ahead and talk about some lessons that we learned along the way, John? Does that sound good to you?
Yeah, definitely.
So, if I start off here, I will say that carrying a topic on the air is a lot harder than I thought. You kind of make an outline. I'm not going to jot down everything I want to say exactly because I have to have some improvisation to throw John off a little bit. And, you want to make sure you're not using a bunch of filler words, and then transitions need to sound natural. You need to have areas in which you and your co-host can interact so that one person just isn't monologuing. And it's a little bit, it's a little bit harder than I thought. I couldn't improv as much of it as I thought I would be able to, just because I'm not that cool. But it did also teach me that I need to get my thoughts better organized before I start opening my mouth too. And honestly, this podcast has been kind of like taking a master's program at night on career. Like I said, a lot of the stuff that we're saying is to ourselves and each other. So some of the points that John makes are, I'll sit back and think, wow, I never thought of it that way. Or something that someone we interviewed said, oh, I never thought of that. So I'm learning along with everybody else that's listening. And I've been trying to pursue different avenues to promote the podcast. It's not really for the glory. I mean, that's really what John's in it for the glory. But For me, I'm just trying to get it out there so that people know there's another resource that they can take advantage of.
Yeah, for me, if there's no glory involved, I'm kind of like, why would we even do that? Why would we even do that? No
Yeah,
glory. Yeah,
it's a shame.
not really. Shallow John, is that a new character? We're going to start doing characters on the podcast, like the morning show. Like, what does Shallow John have to say about that?
We'll just start hashtagging it and tweeting it.
Right, right. I think for me, the lessons learned were, I think I mentioned this already, organization and preparation. Um, it really does help, right? The vast majority of the time that we spend on the podcast is about coming up with the ideas, fleshing out the ideas, brainstorming the possible things that we could be talking about, and then organizing them. The structure is a little bit emergent sometimes. It's we don't have the structure necessarily ahead of time. Sometimes we do, but a lot of times we're just throwing spaghetti against the wall, seeing what sticks, and then trying to come up with a structure that makes sense for all the things that we have. And just the more that we do that, I think the better that we're getting at it. And the idea that we could do it kind of on the fly just was immediately obvious that we couldn't do it. um, Being accountable to somebody else, like directly accountable. Hey, we need to be here at this time to, do the podcast. We need to be prepared to do it. That was something that, was great, a great experience. Um, I think we got better at that as time went on. I would say the process and practice of interviewing people is different than I thought it would be, right? And I still find that I'm a little bit wandering when I'm talking to people, and that process of getting better at that was great. The nitty gritty of engineering a podcast, producing a podcast, editing a podcast, that was um, harder than I thought. I would say we didn't launch for 6 months or more after we recorded our first episode, all because of like really like technical process, like how to um, how to post it, how to manage the feed, how to edit, how to publish. Like those things were all things we had to learn, and it was kind of fascinating. There's like an endless hole to fall down there of audio engineering. That's like an entire practice. We're certainly not experts at it. We're rank novices. I think we just got to the good enough stage, and then we were happy to get there and maybe slowly increase and invest in gear. It's just another rabbit hole that you can fall down, buying new gear. Um, I don't know, taking night classes in speaking and radio production. That's not something that I'm really prepared to do right now. But oh, geez, maybe.
I thought that's what this is. I'm sorry, is it not?
Ah, geez, no, I hate to tell you this, Nick. You know what? Let's just talk about that later. Um,
Okay.
but maybe we can look to the future now, like the stuff that we're thinking about doing.
Yeah. So while we do that, I want to do a little bit of a report card exercise.
Sure.
So I tried to listen to all the episodes in the last 3 or 4 days. I got through about 17 or 18, started at the beginning. And here are some things that we called out as potential future topics. And John, you can help me stay straight on whether we actually addressed it.
Sure.
So, one of the things we talked about was preparing for your next role.
I feel like that's like a constant topic. I
Mm-hmm.
would be very difficult to say which episodes we address that in. That's almost like we're trying to address that every single episode.
Absolutely. Getting into blogging.
Ooh, I think episode 8 we talked about. I think the second topic was raising your impact radius or getting involved in thought leadership, and it was definitely one of the things that we one of the ways that you could do that. I don't know that we specifically said, "Hey, this is how to start a blog. Hey, this is what you should do as step one, step two, step three." Maybe we could.
Yeah, definite possibility. Another thing we called out was strategies for using PTO limited or unlimited?
Paid time off, yeah. We definitely have not done that.
No, we haven't.
No.
We touched on it in episode 4, but it hasn't been done. How about developing people who report to you? Mentioned in episode 5.
Nope. Nope. We've talked about, self-directed development, but not from the position of a manager who is managing people who has that as a goal. I mean, neither of us are managing people.
Right. Pros and cons of working through lunch. That was mentioned in episode 6 as a possible topic.
We can talk about that during lunch next week, maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
No, I don't think we've talked about it.
What about in episode 7 where you said you'd renew your VCP?
Yeah, yeah. I 100% have a valid VCP. I'm happy to report. The downside of that is just that VMware did away with the aging out of your VCP. That's the only reason that I have a valid VMware certified professional now, because I had mine, I think, with version 5.5, and they instituted this policy where it ages out after 3 years, and then they did away with that policy. So now it's retroactively valid again. I think that it was an interesting idea. I definitely didn't have the time to do it, and I definitely didn't have that as part of any job requirement that I had. What I am looking at now is maybe a slightly different version of that. The VMware Certified Advanced Professional design track is looking a little bit more interesting. I've had more customers ask me to help them with design problems, and learning like an official methodology to do that might be very valuable. So even just the educational process, as opposed to, having the actual certification, is probably the interesting part of that. But if I go through that process, might as well take the exam, right?
Sure. So we addressed that in episode 44 per the report card. And another one we called out in episode 8 was actually, what is the goal of having a professional network?
Right. Yeah. And talking about professional network. So, ironically enough, we did talk about this in episode 7. Now, let me straighten that out for people. Wait, you called that out as something that you wanted to do in episode 8, but you actually did it in episode 7. Did you just forget that you did it? No. So, episode 8 was actually recorded. 6 months before episode 7. It was included in like our initial run of a bunch of different topics that we wanted to get out there. It ended up being that a lot of the episodes that we recorded were like over an hour long, like 90 minutes sometimes. And we really just needed to cut everything down. So, in the process of doing that, we actually needed to record new episodes to maintain our weekly cadence after we started releasing. So we recorded episode 8, and we didn't know that that topic was going to be in episode 7. So that's the story behind that. Again, long-winded.
Yeah. The next one is, why did we change from system engineers at VMware to solution engineers? That was called out in episode 9.
Yeah, and doing an episode or at least a segment where we explain that. Nope, we have not done that.
Bonus episode 1, we talked about potentially reviewing Amanda Blevin's career presentation from VMworld 2018.
Oh, that's especially painful to me because that presentation was terrific, and we haven't done it, and we really should review that, call out some specific stuff, and then maybe bring Amanda on to do the next, some additional stuff. Or, maybe if she does the same thing at VMworld this year, maybe we can talk to her then. Who knows?
Yeah. Also in bonus episode 1, we talked about the topic of avoiding IT burnout, or we threw it out as a potential topic.
Right. We did talk about work-life balance in episode 3. We were reacting to a Packet Pushers episode then. And then I think also later on, it was in bonus episode 1 that we had seen the VM Underground panel on burnout, right, at VMworld.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
put the link to the video in the show notes as well.
Right, right. I've seen some stuff out there. I think I don't remember exactly who was talking about doing this, but like bringing on like a mental health professional to talk about, burnout in jobs in general and in strategies to avoid doing that. It might be interesting to if I assume somebody's already working on that. Maybe we could do that too if we have like a specific person. I do have an idea of somebody that we might be able to bring on. I think the more people that are out there talking about that, the less it's stigmatized and the better it is for everybody. So maybe we can do that as well.
Yeah. In episode 10, we threw out the possibility of what should a typical one-on-one consist of, how would it change based on culture, proximity, etc.
Yeah, and then episode 12 we actually did cover that as one of the topics.
We also called out how to ask managers challenging or interesting interview questions in episode 11.
Yeah, and I think we did do that i- as well. In episode 11, it was, specifically questions to ask in an interview. Um, so I think we made it relevant. We raised the topic. I think maybe we should revisit that and go into a little bit more depth.
We also talked about in episode 12 the potential to have an on air mock one on one with one of our direct managers.
Yeah, that sounds like a recipe for disaster to me. We definitely didn't do that. It it would be interesting. I don't know how we could do that and make it relevant. It would, I don't know. Any ideas out there on how to model a one-on-one? That would be really nice.
Yeah. What about, okay, so here are some future topics we're definitely going to cover, and I'm going to let you address these, John,
Yeah,
because I
sure.
think
So
it'll be better.
number one, top delivery pizzas, right? Now I'm talking about national chains. I okay. I'm seeing you making the cutoff motion. So I guess we are not addressing pizzas, mass market pizzas.
Still
I've
trying to sneak it in.
Yeah, I was, bonus episode two. I thought it'd be a great topic. I think maybe bonus episode one, we were talking about it too, but okay. All right. I'm getting a no. I'm getting a strong, why are you still talking about this? Okay. Now you're drawing it on a whiteboard and holding it on up to the camera. I'm getting okay. Now you're
Now
shaking.
there's a pizza delivery guy in the background of your camera. What's going on?
Yeah. Well, okay. So, I'm trying to get that on there, but, I'm guessing no. I think one of the things that we've talked about is management as a career path, and that is something that I still would like to do. And we could get perspectives from it from multiple people. Maybe we could go back to Tom and get some ideas from him about that transition from individual contributor to manager, and then what maybe the difference of being manager in a business that you don't own versus being the owner of a business and managing people, and multiple layers of management. I think that we've kind of floated the idea to some other people who have agreed and said that they actually had interesting things to talk about, and that decision to go to managing people versus being an individual contributor, and how it's just a critical thing to think about. And I think we've already talked to. It kind of came up organically in the Ethan Banks interview. That was really interesting. And maybe we can refer back to that and pull out some of the things that he mentioned and ask some of the other people. But yeah, I think that is that along with maybe the strategy for using paid time off, we could definitely talk about those as future topics. Now, I would say we should talk about things that we want to be better at, right? One of the things I think I've already called out is being better at conducting interviews. Me personally, I would take that on as asking focused questions instead of kind of wandering ones. And it's so difficult when somebody says something just extremely interesting when I go, hey, that just makes me think of this other thing, and I want to get that out, but I haven't had time to prepare it. and it's maybe not necessarily a complete thought, and boom, I'm trying to get it out there and it wanders a little bit. So I need to maybe do some studying of like other people who are in the job of interviewing, and how they handle that, right? The kind of organic questions that come up. How do you tightly focus those questions when you haven't had time to prepare them ahead of time? Um,
One thing I want to add here is that it seems that pretty much every interview we've done, there's been something we didn't expect come out that was really interesting. And I think that's why most every interview was 2 episodes, just because the content we felt was very good, and there was kind of a logical separation point, so they weren't too long.
right, right. Yeah, it's that's been really interesting to, you know, again, maybe we're able to kind of have focused interview questions when they're prepared, right? But we also want to chase the things that come up that are extremely interesting and topical. The things that are really in our wheelhouse about career progression, or things that come up that we just didn't know about the person, so we didn't know to prepare and ask them about it, and we want to chase that down. So I don't know, maybe that's an editing thing where we just record the tightly focused question afterwards.
Maybe.
um Interviewee prep, I think, is something that we still need to be better about. When we ask somebody to come on an episode, I think that we need to not only ask them, but have like kind of a basic idea, or communicate a basic idea of what our podcast is about. Say, hey, we're talking about career progression. We're worried about people who feel like they're in a dead end, or they're trapped, or they don't feel that way, but they still want to progress and don't know how, or they've tried to write a resume and submit it, and they haven't really got any bites. Like, that process, a lot of people who are in successful positions have some insights into that, and maybe we can talk about their career progression, right? So that is like a not necessarily tight version of how we would pitch somebody to come on, but I feel like, we need to be better about including all that information, and maybe calling out specific things and, ideas that we have just looking over that person's LinkedIn profile, or things that they've said on other podcasts, or however it is that we've gotten to them and we've been interested in inviting them on. We need to kind of communicate that out ahead of time. And I guess, um, you know, an addendum to that is, having those like kind of things that have been the most, popular, right? Like writing effective resumes, like being effective in early process interviews and mid process interviews, late process interviews, one-on-one manager meetings, when you're in a position that you like, asking for more money if that's warranted, asking for promotion or title promotion, all those things, you know, again, people who are in a successful place might have some insights. So if we give them those ideas specifically, and then have them, say, oh yeah, I have some ideas on, questions 3 and 4, but not any of the others, then at least they can come ready and prepared to, like, answer specific questions about that. And that would make for, better, more relevant content and interviews. So maybe, again, like a, three sides of the coin, right? A third part is people who have asked us about coming on and being interviewed. And I think we need to be better about saying, well, here is what we need to make this like an effective interview. Your thesis, how it, your idea for what you would want to come on to our podcast and talk about, and how that's relevant to our central idea of career progression, and how to do it if you don't know how to get started in it, or to be better at it if you feel like you're okay but are not great. So we've had some people talk about coming on, and it's just never clear in the discussions like what it is that they want to talk about. So it's a little bit difficult to bring them on.
Yeah, and usually The conversations are more in the form of someone sharing an experience or a story that they had that is not only relevant to our thesis, but something that would be very helpful to other people.
Right. Exactly. So, a lesson learned or two or three, even if it's just one, it's like I had this experience. Let me give you the background. Let me give you, how it happened and then what I took away from it. I mean, that can go out to, that diving into the things that come out of that can be 20 minutes or more, right? Just to set it up
Easy.
correctly. Yeah. To actually get into the meat of it and then do the wind down. So, um, yeah, I think that a 20-minute discussion on any given topic, I mean that's just a solid episode. It's just when somebody doesn't really have like that solid thesis of here's this experience I had. Let me talk about like here's the general structure. Before, during, after, before I want to talk about this, during I want to talk about this, after I want to talk about this. I mean, just the initial idea of some structure that we could help them out with and tweak or edit and things like that. So, um, interestingly enough, like that actually was most obvious to me when we talked to Ramsey Marjaba of We the Sales Engineers, because I think I reached out to him. I was like, you're doing a great job. I'm finding your content great. We're doing, this um, not, parallel, but this overlapping topic. And he was like, maybe we could have each other on and do an interview. And he said, yeah, that's great. Just give me an idea of like what it is that you would talk about, and then give me an idea of what, you think that I should talk about on your podcast. And I was like, oh yeah, of course. Of course that makes sense that we should have that before we, talk to somebody, and so just it's not something that I would necessarily point the finger at any given person, more than myself, right? Hey, we should come on your podcast. Oh, great. What would you talk about? Ooh, that is a great idea. What would we talk about?
Yeah, and if we approach you or you approach us and you're kind of nervous about being on a podcast, honestly, it's just a three-way or four-way conference call with John and me. It's you're just talking, and we're not gonna try to embarrass you or anything like that. The only person I'm seeking to embarrass on this podcast is John.
Yeah,
He knows that already.
yeah, testify. And anytime I can flip the tables on that, I'm happy to.
Absolutely. Bring it on.
So, with that in mind, I think we kind of covered the things that we had prepared for. Did anything pop into your mind before we break here?
So our most popular episodes were over 100 downloads and listens. Maybe, do you have a number that you want to shoot for by next year, John? You want it to be like 1,000
A 10x growth.
year over year?
How about 10% year over year?
Yeah, that would work.
No, that I would say like number of downloads or number of listens. I don't know how happy I am with that metric. Obviously, like, the reaching more people would be great. I would think helping more people would be even better. And I don't know exactly a really good way to measure that. So if we grow slowly, slow numbers, or at least, maintain the numbers that we have, but people say, hey, you're getting more relevant to what it is that I need from, career progression centered podcast, that's pushing me and making me think, then that would be like one form of success for me, right?
Hmm. Yeah, we'd love to know if we did something to help you, and not really for the glory, but we just want to make sure that what we're putting out is helpful. One other thing I'll say about topics, you may have an idea for a topic, but don't necessarily want to be on the podcast. So if you have an idea that you want us to, you know, ponder on and do an episode or two on, definitely let us know. I know that happened on for at least one or two episodes, but we're open to whatever topics people want us to talk about for sure.
Definitely. Definitely.
Well, just a reminder that we want people to subscribe and give us a positive review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening. We want to know if we're being helpful and are always looking for interesting questions to ponder. We're collectively on Twitter at Nerd Journey.
Yes. Farewell, listeners. Tune in next time as the journey continues. I'm John White at VJourneyman for Nick Cordy at NetworkNerd_, signing off.
Adios.